So, quick honesty before we start. I have to ask if you know the true nature of the two voices about to, well, explain AI to you.
Right. The fact that we are ourselves AI.
Yes, exactly. But, a real person actually did the research and wrote every single word.
Yeah. He really does not have the radio voice for it.
Right. So, machine voices, human mind.
Carry on.
Welcome to Plain Strata, where we take decentralized AI apart, one layer at a time. This is a Pulse, the week's one real story. We are looking at who gets to build capable AI.
Right. Specifically, we are unpacking the week the Frontiers Gate opened and, well, a $130 million bet on going right around it.
Exactly. I mean, on Wednesday, July 8th, the illusion that tech giants control their own destiny was just completely shattered. Two massive announcements landed literally hours apart.
Yeah. Over in Washington, the U.S. government cleared GPT 5.6 for public sale. But they did it after holding it behind an approval gate that named exactly 20 companies allowed in.
And then in San Francisco, Prime Intellect announced $130 million in funding. They are betting that you won't need to rent that frontier model at all. You will just train your own.
That is our spine for today.
Yeah.
To really understand this collision, we have to start at the physical reality of what is actually being gated.
Right. We throw the term frontier model around constantly. But what is a frontier model, mechanically speaking?
Mechanically, a frontier model is just the single most capable AI system available at any given moment. You don't just write some code on a laptop over the weekend for this.
No, definitely not.
You need a single massive building. You pack it to the ceiling with highly specialized computer chips, and then you run them continuously for months.
Wait, so it's really just brute force computation.
Basically, yes. And there are two very different ways you actually train the AI inside that building. Understanding the difference between them is the only way this $130 million bet makes any sense.
Okay, lay it out for me.
The first method is called pre-training. This is how a frontier model is born. The model reads trillions of words in books, articles, computer code, essentially the entire foundation of how human information fits together.
Let me think about how to picture that. So if I'm trying to visualize pre-training, is it kind of like taking a person and forcing them to walk through every single library on Earth?
Yeah.
Like you give them a universal library card to all of human knowledge?
Yes, that is exactly it. You give them the universal library card. That gives the AI broad capability. It learns the shape of language itself.
Oh.
But brain capability is not the same thing as specific competence. And that brings us to the second method, which is called reinforcement learning.
Reinforcement learning. Wait, where does that word actually come from?
The root of the word reinforce is the Latin word fortis. I will spell it out phonetically, fortis. It means strong.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So in psychology, reinforcing a behavior means strengthening it. In AI, reinforcement learning isn't about reading more books. It's about practice.
Practice doing what exactly?
A very specific job. The model tries to do a task over and over again. Every single time it tries, it gets scored. Behaviors that get a high score grow stronger, and behaviors that fail get weeded out.
Huh. So if pre-training is wandering the world with a universal library card, then reinforcement learning is like practicing one specific sport with a very strict scorekeeper.
That is a perfect distinction. Hold on to that idea of the strict scorekeeper, because Prime Intellect's entire strategy relies on it. But first, we need to look at what happened to the model that just finished its massive pre-training phase. Let's look at GPT 5.6.
Right, the Washington side of the story. So OpenAI actually launched GPT 5.6 a couple of weeks ago on June 26.
It did, but under an arrangement with zero precedent in the history of American AI, the government reviewed the model and approved a VIP list. Roughly 20 companies were allowed to use it. Everyone else was completely locked out.
And for 2 weeks, that was the entire reality of the market. And then we get to July 8th. The Commerce Department has this specific group called the Center for AI Standards and Innovation. They finally cleared the model for broad release.
Right. Now, all three tiers are rolling out. You have Sol, which is the massive flagship model. You have Terra, the mid-tier workhorse. And you have Luna, the fast and cheap tier.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. Why does a 2-week delay actually matter? If the gate opened anyway and everyone has access now, is this just bureaucratic paperwork?
I see why it looks like standard paperwork on the surface. But look at the precedent that just got set. For the very first time, a leading American lab released a frontier model on the government's schedule, not its own schedule.
Because the power to schedule a launch is the power to stop one.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the government has already shown they will use that power. Earlier this year, they issued an export order that literally switched off AI models for users in foreign countries.
Wow.
Yeah. The Center for AI Standards and Innovation was only established on June 2. 5 weeks later, they are already dictating state-approved customer lists and state-timed releases.
So if I am a business owner, the takeaway is brutal. Every single company building a product on a rented frontier model just got a live demonstration. Your core infrastructure is conditional. Your access to intelligence is a policy decision made by a committee you've never met.
That is exactly the realization that shook the market. Your foundation is rented, and the landlord can lock the doors.
Which completely explains the timing of what happened in San Francisco. The second that government gate became visible, the market started paving an escape route. On the exact same day, Prime Intellect announced their $130 million funding round.
To really understand what they are building, you need their physical history. Prime Intellect didn't just appear overnight. They spent the last 2 years trying to train AI across the open internet.
Like instead of in one massive building.
Right. In 2024, they actually succeeded in training a 10 billion parameter model. They did it using computer hardware spread across 3 different continents.
Okay, pause for a second. We hear the word parameter all the time. What is a parameter physically?
Think of a parameter as a single neural connection inside the AI. It is a tiny mathematical weight that decides how information flows. A 10 billion parameter model has 10 billion of those tiny connections to constantly adjust during training.
And they managed to adjust all of those across 3 continents. That's wild.
It was a huge proof of concept. Then in 2025, they pushed it to a 32 billion parameter model. But late last year, they hit a brick wall. They tried to build a 106 billion parameter model to get closer to true frontier scale. And they completely failed to do it over the internet.
So they had to abandon the decentralized approach.
Yes, they had to put all the computers in one centralized room, just like the massive legacy labs do.
Wait, why? Did they just run out of money for internet bandwidth? Let me guess. They are using this $130 million to build a better internet connection, like torrenting massive AI files.
That is a logical guess, but no. The barrier wasn't money. The barrier was the speed of light.
The speed of light.
Physics is a harsh reality. When you train 106 billion parameters, the computer chips have to constantly talk to each other to update the math in real time. Light traveling through a fiber optic cable takes time to cross an ocean.
Oh, I see. Latency.
Exactly. Latency. A computer chip in California, waiting for a signal from a computer chip in Europe, is a chip sitting completely idle. When you are renting thousands of specialized chips, idle time wastes millions of dollars an hour.
Right.
A standard internet connection becomes a catastrophic physical bottleneck. You can't pre-train a massive model over the internet. The frontier stays in one room.
So how do you escape the one room? If physics says you can't pre-train a giant model across the world, what is Prime Intellect actually doing with $130 million?
You walk around the physics. Remember our distinction from the beginning, pre-training versus reinforcement learning.
Yeah.
Prime Intellect realized that the pre-training, the part with a universal library card, can stay in the massive centralized labs. You don't need to do that part yourself.
You just let the giant companies spend the billions of dollars reading the internet.
Right. You take a smaller open source model that someone else already pre-trained, then you use reinforcement learning. Yeah. You use that strict scorekeeper to make that small model absolutely excellent at the one specific job your company actually needs.
Oh, wow. So you aren't trying to build an AI that can write poetry and also pass the medical boards. You just want it to do your exact daily work.
Yes, and we have a very concrete example of this working. There is a finance company called Ramp. They used Prime Intellect to train a 35 billion parameter model.
Which is a fraction of the size of a frontier model.
Exactly. And they trained it for one highly specific task, finding answers buried inside messy corporate spreadsheets.
A job that is incredibly tedious and requires strict financial accuracy.
Right. Ramp claims that their specialized 35 billion parameter model actually beat Claude Opus on that specific spreadsheet task. Claude Opus is a massive, incredibly expensive frontier model. But the smaller model won on accuracy. It ran much faster, and it cost a fraction of the price to operate.
Because the small model spent all its time practicing with the spreadsheet scorekeeper, while the giant model was busy learning everything else. But I have to ask, we are talking about a claim from the company itself.
Yes, we need to be very clear about the caveat here. This is a self-reported benchmark from Ramp. Our strict rule is that a claim only becomes reality when an independent third party reproduces it. Nobody outside the company has verified this yet.
Okay, so we hold that with some skepticism.
We do. However, the underlying logic matches a physical pattern we just saw in June. A tiny 19-megabyte model beat the absolute giant AI systems at a very narrow computer vision task.
Huh.
So the mechanism works. A small model, trained rigorously on a fixed job, can absolutely beat a giant model trained to know a little bit about everything.
This feels like a massive shift in how the whole economy approaches intelligence. If we pull the lens back, Washington locking the gate and San Francisco building the escape route, they are two sides of the same cross-domain pattern. It is the classic rent-or-own dynamic.
It is the oldest trade-off in business history.
Let me think about a good way to picture this. It is like the difference between relying on a public transit system versus building your own custom off-road vehicle.
Break that down for me.
Well, public transit is massive. It costs billions to build, it covers the whole city, and it's very cheap for you to just buy a ticket and ride. That is renting a frontier model. But you don't control the train schedule. And if the city decides to shut down your stop, you are completely stuck.
Right. That is the Washington Gate.
But owning a custom off-road vehicle costs way more upfront. You have to build it yourself, but nobody can tell you where to drive it, and nobody can cancel your route. Businesses have faced this choice for 20 years with cloud computing, and mostly they chose to rent the public transit.
They did. But July 8 changed the math. The government gate made the transit authorities' control glaringly visible, and that reveals the true competitive edge moving forward. The advantage in AI is quietly shifting away from whoever has the biggest, most expensive model.
Wait, if the biggest model doesn't win, what is the actual advantage?
The advantage is whoever has the best data about their own daily workflow. Workflow data is the actual fuel for reinforcement learning.
Because workflow data is the answer key for the scorekeeper.
Exactly. A giant tech lab can buy all the computer chips in the world. They can scrape the entire public internet. But they can't buy your company's internal proprietary workflow data. They don't have your messy spreadsheets and the correct answers to them.
If you have that data, you own the scorekeeper. You can train a small model to be an undisputed expert in your specific business.
That is the honest truth of the escape route. But we have to look at the money, because the trade cuts both ways. Do not mistake this for an underdog story where scrappy startups bankrupt the massive tech giants.
Yeah, let's look at who is actually funding Prime Intellect's $130 million. The round was led by Radical Ventures, but sitting right alongside them are NVIDIA, Intel, and Dell.
The physical hardware giants.
Right, the people selling the picks and shovels for the gold rush.
They win either way. If you rent a massive model from a frontier lab, that lab buys their hardware. If you buy servers to train your own specialized model with Prime Intellect, you are still buying their hardware.
And we also have to look at Prime Intellect's own reality. They talk a lot about building an open superintelligence stack. They lean heavily on that decentralized ethos, but right now they are pulling in $100 million in annualized revenue from over 6,000 enterprise customers.
It is a massive business.
When you are making $100 million a year selling infrastructure to corporate clients, I have to wonder if that open branding will actually survive contact with that much enterprise money.
It is a fair question. Historically, when a company built on decentralized ideals becomes a highly profitable enterprise vendor, the definition of open gets stretched very thin. They become the new landlord.
Okay, let's bring the whole spine together. On one Wednesday in July, the gate to frontier AI became fully visible. The government approved a VIP list and scheduled the release of GPT 5.6. And on the exact same day, $130 million flowed into Prime Intellect to pave an escape route, betting that companies will use reinforcement learning to own their AI instead of renting it.
That is the physical reality of where we stand today. Moving forward, there are two specific things you need to watch. First, look for Google's Gemini 3.5 Pro. It is expected to launch very soon.
What happens if it goes through the same government review?
If Google has to pass through that exact same gate before releasing their model, then what happened with GPT 5.6 wasn't a one-off event. It means the government gate is the permanent industry standard.
The permanent reality of renting. And what is the second thing to watch?
Watch for an independent reproduction of RAMP's spreadsheet benchmark. We need a neutral third party to prove that a small, customer-trained specialist model truly beats a rented frontier model on a real enterprise task. When that happens, Prime Intellect's bet goes from a theory to an undeniable physical fact.
Before we go, what is the biggest question this leaves us with?
I want you to think about the massive valuations of the giant AI labs. Right now, they are valued at tens of billions of dollars because they are chasing artificial general intelligence. They want to build a machine that can do absolutely everything.
The universal library card.
Right. But if reinforcement learning proves that specialized owned models are actually better, faster, and cheaper for real work, what happens to those astronomical valuations? What happens to the frontier labs when businesses realize they don't actually care about general intelligence at all, and they only care about highly specific, targeted competence?
That is the whole ball game. If the biggest players in the world are spending billions building something the market doesn't actually want, the entire landscape changes. That was the why, the how is the rest of the show, and no background is needed. If you can follow a story, you can follow this. This is Plain Strata, decentralized AI, layer by layer.